Being January 27th, 2025 at 7:10, I call this town meeting to order. First piece of business is a motion to admit. Mr. Studo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, I move that the following non-registered voters or visitors be admitted to the meeting: Rob Carbone, Norcam; Maureen Doherty, North Reading transcript; and further that the following non-registered voters be admitted to the meeting and permitted to sit with officials in departments they serve: Susan Duplain, Town Clerk; Stephanie Conley, Assistant Town Clerk; Delaney Sharkey, Staff; Danielle McKnight, Town Planner; Patrick Daly, Superintendent of Schools. And further, Lillian Hartman, Eleanor Ricard, Matthew Cooper, Nick Tomero, Jerry Noel, Jason Smith, Allison Kane, Michael Menipelli, Sophia Navalov, Anthony Spada Jr., John Eichman, Debbie Carbone, Mark Zimmerman, Dan O'Donnell, Lydia Eldridge.
On the motion to admit, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Just a few of the rules for tonight. If you're seeking recognition, go to one of the microphones. Wait till I call on you to speak. Name and address for the record, please. Please don't speak out from your seats. All registered voters should be wearing a yellow ribbon. All guests will be wearing a black ribbon. We have two tellers tonight, Lori Capizzuto, and she will count from the middle to my left, and Amy Sonia is going to count on my right side. Please shut off your cell phones. And with that, I think everybody's seated. Mr. Studo, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Moderator, I rise to a point of personal privilege. If I may, for those of you who were not informed, but former member of the Select Board, or Board of Selectmen at the time, Billy Smith, passed away this past week. I would just like to ask the meeting to take a moment of silence and reflection on his service to the community and appreciation, and pass on our condolences to his family. For those of you who knew Billy, and again, most of the people in the community do know Billy. I mean, he was born and raised here, lifelong resident. He was a member of the Board of Selectmen. He was a member of the Planning Commission. He was a member of the Finance Committee. He was on the Personnel Board way back when. He was a member of the Fire Department. He was a lieutenant on the Police Department. And as I said, a lifelong resident of the community. He was a local businessman. Had a lot of IOUs out there that he never intended to collect on. Did a lot of good for the people from a political standpoint and from a personal and business standpoint. And take it from me, we've locked horn over the years, but he's a friend. And he's going to be sorely missed. We certainly appreciate his long, dedicated service to the community. And if we could just take a moment of silence in recognition of his service and appreciation. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. Studo, first motion.
Motion to dispense with reading of the warrant. I move to dispense with the reading of the warrant and refer to the articles by the number, and further dispense with the reading of the return of service by the constable.
Any discussion on the motion?
Noel Kelly, 33, is this on?
No.
Noel Kelly, 33 Leland Road. Do we have a quorum?
We do, I'm sorry, 153
Thank you.
when I called the meeting to order. I apologize. Thank you. On the motion to dispense with the reading of the warrant, seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 1, Mr. Rudloff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 1, amend code zoning bylaws, accessory dwelling unit. I move to amend section 236 as printed in the warrant, with the following being inserted as a new subsection CG as follows. An ADU must have a permanent foundation and be connected to external utilities, no trailers, manufactured homes, as defined in General Law, Chapter 140, Section 32Q, or any other dwelling unit equipped with a permanent chassis with wheels may be used as an accessory dwelling unit.
I understand there's a presentation on this of less than 5 minutes by Danielle, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Danielle, you have the...
On August 6th, 2024, the Affordable Homes Act was signed into law. The law allows accessory dwelling units by right in all communities in Massachusetts beginning on February 2nd, 25. State law imposes basic size requirements. ADUs may be 900 square feet or half the area of a main house, whichever is smaller, and garages do count toward this area limit. Title V and the building code fully apply, as with any construction. Communities may impose reasonable regulations per the state. Local bylaws can regulate ADUs in a similar manner as single-family homes in the same zoning district. Towns may not require more than one parking space for an ADU unless located near transit, which North Reading is not, and so this provision does not apply. North Reading zoning bylaws do not currently regulate or allow ADUs. The proposed zoning bylaws amend our existing accessory uses, accessory structures, and the definitions section of the zoning bylaw in order to adopt a definition that's consistent with the state definition of ADUs. The proposed bylaw provides additional dimensional regulation. In the absence of the proposed bylaw change, current setbacks for accessory structures would apply, putting ADUs much closer to neighboring property lines. The proposed bylaw makes the setback stricter, as they would otherwise be the same as primary dwellings. In public discussion, some concerns were raised about the use of mobile homes or office trailers as ADUs, so an amendment to the main motion was drafted that provides that additional regulation. The main motion, which you heard a moment ago, but I'll just restate it, the main motion further modifies the bylaw as written in the warrant to require an ADU to be on a permanent foundation as follows. An ADU must have a permanent foundation and be connected to external utilities. No trailers, manufactured homes as defined in General Laws, Chapter 140, Section 32Q, or any other dwelling unit equipped with a permanent chassis with wheels may be used as an accessory dwelling unit. And one final note, this is an evolving area of law impacted by new state law regulations and subject to interpretation by the state and courts. The proposed bylaw reflects an intention to regulate ADUs in North Reading to the extent possible in compliance with still developing interpretations of the state law.
Thank you. Recommendation for the Select Board, Mr. Studo.
Select Board recommends.
The Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
For the CPC, Mr. Rudloff.
CPC recommends.
The motion is now open for discussion. Any discussion? Mr. Yule.
Okay, this one works. All right. Just I want to clarify, this is on the article, but not the amended article? It's on this here. Is the amendment in there? I'm not seeing it.
No, the main motion has this language in it.
Okay,
It's not, we're not doing two votes on this. There's not been an amendment. What was read on the floor was a full motion. Correct, John? Yes. That's town council.
okay, okay.
So we're not doing two votes.
Okay, great. Through you, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank the Community Planning Commission and the Select Board for doing whatever they could do to amend and adjust this warrant in order to protect the neighbors and the residents throughout the community. But one of the things that I've heard is that the law itself is not a good law. It does not protect the community in its entirety as a result of the law. I would urge both the Select Board and the CPC to send a message to our state government, to our local representatives, to say exactly that this is not a good law. We are dealing with it as it is presented, but it's really not beneficial to the community because it will change the character of the community, where the point is that it's an attack on homeowners directly. So you're going to wind up with a community filled with, well, they're not going to be double-deckers, we know that, but in essence, they're going to be side-by-side deckers, for lack of a better description. So I urge the Select Board and the CPC to take a stand, if only in words, to our state government and say, this is not good for Massachusetts, and it's not good for our community. Thank you.
I do have an update on the quorum. It's 172. Sir.
Hi, John Rogers, 39 Tower Hill Road. I would ask that the select board not send that type of message. I very much appreciate the state's efforts to find a way to make Massachusetts a more livable place. That means we need more housing. I appreciate the efforts of the CPC and the select board to find a way to do this within the confines of the law in a way that I think is appropriate for this community. And I think that is the message that we can send, is by passing this and just complying with the law, making our community more accessible to more people. I've lived here for only 25 years, so I know I'm a relative newbie, but this is a community that people should want to live in. This is a way to make it more accessible to more people, and I very much support that, and I hope others in this meeting will. Thank you.
Robert Atkinson Jr., 82 Elm Street. I have a question. You mentioned that the zoning would be more restrictive than the law allows, at least based on current interpretation. Could you tell me just how it differs from the state law and just how more restrictive it is? I'm not opposed to this in principle. I like the idea that you can ban, not permit mobile homes, but on the other hand, I'd like to know what just exactly the things like setbacks and sidelines, how that changes with an ADU, excuse me, as opposed to a single-family home. Thank you.
Danielle, who's the town planner. Danielle.
So there are some basics that the state already allows, and this bylaw puts in place a few additional restrictions, and those restrictions include things such as setbacks, as you mentioned. Our assumption in doing the planning for this is that the setbacks would just default to our accessory structure setbacks, and the CPC was interested in making those setbacks a bit greater. Now, we had been advised by the draft regulations the state issued that it would be fine to do similar dimensional regulations as one would do for a single-family home in the same district. So that is one of the items that have been put in here. Additional items are that they cannot be used for short-term rental units. That's not in the state law, but it's something that the town is permitted to do. We have specific language that says an ADU can't be placed in separate ownership from its principal dwelling. That would avoid a situation where an ADU was, made into a condo, and essentially the property just became a two-family property, and we didn't really want to see that. And it's under our understanding that we'll be able to regulate that. We have limited ADUs to one per principal dwelling. There are some communities that have opted to allow more than one ADU by special permit. This bylaw does not do that. We have put in that the principal dwelling, if it's non-conforming, while we can't require a ZBA vote on a special permit, we can still require a finding by the ZBA. So those are really the most that we could regulate beyond what the state.
So in effect, other than it's a single occupant, no multiple ADUs, single ADU. For example, a freestanding garage, if I read the zoning code the last time I checked, is 10-foot setback from the rear line. Whereas if it's attached to the house, it becomes like a 50-foot setback. Those are unchanged, things of that nature. Sideline, for example, I think we're in an R10 district, so it's a 10-foot sideline. But maybe the zoning folks could educate me a little bit more on that.
The goal.
Danielle?
The goal of the CPC with putting the setbacks into the bylaw were to make sure that the setbacks wouldn't be the same as what you would have for, say, a shed or another accessory structure garage, which would, in most zoning districts, be 10 feet. They have put in place instead this proposal that it follow whatever the setbacks are required for a single family home in any given zoning district. So in Residence A, that would be 25 feet. We have done this with kind of to the best of our knowledge that we were allowed to regulate in accordance with what we regulate for single family homes. There is guidance continuing to come out from the state. We may find that we aren't able to put in all of these things. We've been working out the best that we could. It's possible some of this could be stricken, but that was the purpose.
So we may have to come back here in a year or two when the state provides more guidance or the courts provide more precedent in the form of decisions. So this is basically just a starting point, and if the state changes things further or if the courts rule in different areas, we may be back here to modify this again in a year or two.
Danielle?
Yes, I think that's a possibility. I think there are final regulations that haven't been released yet from the state. They're not official, but they've been posted on the state's website, and there is some language in there that would lead us to believe that it's possible that we may not be able to keep some of these, including the setbacks. We don't know that yet, though.
Yeah.
We're just kind of going on our best faith efforts, but it is entirely possible that at a future town meeting, we may need to revise some of what we've put in place, since this is such a new law and the guidance is only coming out.
When do you expect the state to make final approval for the regulations that they've proposed and posted?
Danielle?
The state is making their final regulations official, released on February 2nd. They're posted currently on the website. They're still up for interpretation, and then in terms of our bylaw, if it passes tonight, the Attorney General's office will have 90 days to approve it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir?
Thank you. Parker Moffett at 55 Central Street. A couple of quick questions just to clarify. The previous slide indicated that the current laws of the town do not currently regulate or allow ADUs. I think that those words mean different things. So is it an issue where you could have an ADU currently and there's just nothing that governs what the rules are around that, or it's not explicitly permitted under the current laws of the town?
Danielle?
Currently, our zoning bylaw does not allow ADUs at all. They're not defined in our bylaw, so this proposal has a definition, which we're lacking, and they're not regulated either, which means we have a setup in our zoning bylaw where if something is not explicitly allowed, it is prohibited. And so that's the way the building inspector, who's the zoning enforcement official for the town, enforces against if there is a use that is not allowed, is considered prohibited. There are some that are in existence.
Grandfathered in.
Some that may have been allowed at other times. That those are what they are. But it's, if you read our current zoning bylaw as it is today, they are not permitted.
Thank you. One additional question. The prohibition on short-term rentals, is that applicable to only the ADUs or to the property as a whole for somebody who wanted to rent out their home for a period of weeks?
So there are two bylaws that are two separate articles, two different bylaws. One could pass, the other could not. They both could pass, they both might fail.
Correct.
Article 1 really just deals with accessory dwelling units, and within that, there is a provision that they may not be used for short-term rental.
Specific to the
It's
ADUs?
specific to ADUs.
Okay.
Article 2, which I won't talk too long about because we're not there yet,
Yeah.
is specific to all short-term rentals.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Noel Kelly, 33 Leland Road. I'm kind of disappointed that no members of the boards have stepped up to speak to this article in terms of yay or nay, or where they stand. I know they've all recommended it, but I've watched every discussion over the last several months on this article. In fact, I've watched it for a couple of years. We had a very vibrant conversation at one time about ADUs in this town, and it fell off the wagon, so to speak, and it went into the ether until the state resurrected this as a mandate. And I would just like to speak to the reasoning behind this, okay? We're faced with two serious issues in our state at the moment. We're faced with an exceedingly high cost of housing. I have two children that are both in their 30s. Neither one of them own a home because neither one of them can afford. They're both gainfully employed. When I was 30, at their age, I had a home. Now, any of you who have children or know people that have children of that age group, you will understand that most of them cannot afford to buy a home because the ratio of income to house cost is far different to what it was when we boomers were at that age. So this is a way to perhaps address that imbalance that currently exists. And what I'm getting at is, if you have a senior citizen living in North Reading who's finding it difficult on a fixed income to meet their annual budgetary needs, this is potentially a way for them to be able to stay in town. And to be able to, so the alternative is for them to sell out. And a family moves in with young children, and then that's your further burden on the schools. We can't live in the present. We can't stop things moving forward. This is the world in which we live in. The alternative is to allow these residents to continue to live within the community and contribute to the tax base, because if you do an ADU, the tax value of that property goes up, the assessed value. So the tax revenue will go up. That is my point. This is not just about a zoning bylaw. There's a lot behind it, and I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Mr. Baskin.
To answer the gentleman's question, Mr. Moderator, this law was originally intended for the housing of family members, etc., for affordability. There is no affordability tie to it. This doesn't tie to the Affordability Act. It actually moves us farther from the affordability goal we need to hit for the seniors, for the state. Someone earlier asked about being able to have one ADU on their lot. You can have multiple ADUs on your lot by special permit. Someone asked about pre-existing ADUs. Pre-existing ADUs cannot be regulated. They might be saying that wrong, but pre-existing ADUs, what's the way to say it, is not policed. Thank you. One thing I've brought up, and this is something, to me, I felt like I had my hands tied to vote yes for. It's a free market ADU, so it's not specific to family members. Trying to get around this, one thing I asked was if we could tax it differently, if we could add fees to it differently. The reason I ask these questions is because by North Reading, this is a losing proposition. This is a losing proposition. No doubt about it. We got our hands tied. We got to do what we got to do. The heavy hand of the state is going to change the rules again, which is unfortunate. So some things that we may vote on tonight may get changed. But to losing proposition, I want to speak to that. Let's say you got a lot, we tax it at, for round numbers, $10,000. You add an external ADU, or just again, round numbers, add 30% to your taxes, $3,000, right? You put one student in either that ADU or the principal dwelling, costs $20,000 a year to send that kid to school. We are immediately $17,000 in the hole. So it's unfortunate. There are ways why people would say no. However, if you get your hands tied, I just wanted to address those questions as to, you want to put your family in. Well, that's not always the case, Mr. Kelly. And the reason is not only are you could you free market rent it, but the grandparents or the elders that may live in the principal dwelling may choose to go to the ADU and put their kids and their grandkids in the principal dwelling. So just from a money standpoint, I know there's a lot to this law. I don't want to prolong town meetings any more longer, but it is a losing proposition. Thank you.
Ms. Yule.
Irene Yule, 427 Park Street. I know that there's more I need to know about the ADUs and all of its particulars. And I'm sure there's some good reasons for a lot of people here who are for it. But the one reason that seems to be pulling, that people who want this to go through, pull at the heartstrings of the seniors. I am a senior resident in North Reading. And what we have to remember is that in order for the ADU to be to come within the standards of what we have to do, I can't remember the name of it, but you have to have separate plumbing, you have to have a separate entrance, you have to have electric codes, all the codes need to be up to date. That can cost thousands of dollars. It needs a kitchen, it needs a bathroom. And I don't know about a lot of seniors in this town, but I know that Jeff and I don't have the kind of money to put into something like that in order to charge somebody, I don't know, $1,000 a month to live there. And then with the laws that we have in Massachusetts, what if somebody moves in there and they don't pay? It's very difficult to get rid of people who are renting. You can't really ask them to leave if they don't want to leave, because then the onus comes on the owner. So there's pros and cons to this, I'm sure, but please don't confuse the issue with saying it'll help all the seniors to stay here in North Reading, because they'll need a lot of money to get the ADU ready to comply with all the zoning laws.
Amy Sonia, 24 Fieldcrest Terrace. I'm just hearing some of these questions, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding it and everybody else is understanding it. This article does not prevent ADUs, correct? It is tightening our zoning bylaws to make setbacks so that I don't reach out my side window and touch my neighbor's ADU. Right? Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we are not preventing ADUs. It's a state law that we have to allow them now, correct?
I can sit down.
Mr. Redlaw.
Yeah, thank you. To underscore what Amy just eloquently said, this law goes into effect on February 2nd, whether we do anything. All we're trying to do is, number one, put the definitions in our bylaws for an ADU that exactly meet the state's definitions. That's what we're doing. And then the state, as Danielle pointed out, gives some provisions for the town that you can meet at least the same standards of what the zone you're in. So if you're in a residential district, as she pointed out, and you have a 25-yard setback, that's what the ADU would have to meet as well. These are very reasonable. What the CPC did, and I'm not sure where you've been, but I'm a volunteer, and I'm there every 2 weeks. You know, so when you say you haven't heard from anyone, I guess, because I haven't seen you at one meeting, but I'm there. Well, I could be doing a lot of other stuff, probably what you're doing, but I'm there. And we've been talking about ADUs for my 2 terms, 6 years, almost on a bi-weekly basis, it seems like, because it's gone up, it's come down, but now it's mandated, so the deal's done. But, so I take offense to that because everybody knows where I stand on it. I don't like it. I don't think it's good. I don't think the state is taking into account all the different towns that it's mandating this on. We're different than Revere. We're different than other towns. So the other part about the law, if you read, other than these small little things we did, we don't want it to be like a shed 10 feet away from another one of our neighbors' lot lines. Is that unreasonable? You know, is that an unreasonable thing to add into the bylaws? I think it's very reasonable. So everyone in this town can build an ADU. We're just putting some small things on that presently the state's allowing us to do, so we're taking advantage of that. But I think a lot of the other people that have come up, and Mr. Massey has said a couple things too that I agree with. It's problematic. We don't know. I mean, we do want the seniors to stay here, but if they move into an ADU, which is what you'd want, who comes into the house? A family with kids? And again, we know they cost $16,000, $17,000 a child. So the tax situation is not better. You're going to maybe get another $1,000, $2,000 to have an ADU in your tax bill. It's not going to cover $17,000. So it's really a model that's been forced on us, and we're just going to have to see how it goes. But these are just small things that we've done. So I appreciate your time.
Ryan Brooks, 2 Anthony Road. So what no one has brought up is I can't put an ADU under these guidelines because I have a leaching field, I have a septic tank. The way my property is laid out, I can't put one. So ultimately, I'll have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a potential addition, as opposed to potentially spending $30,000 for having potentially a grandfather come up for the summer when they are in Florida for the winter, or how about a teenage kid that wants to work, wants to get an apartment, wants their freedom, but they can't afford $4,000 a month at Martin's Landing. You could have them move out there. So, the whole idea of, a family of 5 is going to move in and we're going to send 3 kids to school. Yes, that might happen, but what about all of the other situations where a kid wants to move out, but they can't move out because minimum wage is $14.25, and you can't live at Martin's Landing, first and last, but what you need, it's $50,000 to rent something these days. So I can't, under these guidelines, I look at that and I get it, 10 feet, I wouldn't want, a huge structure going up 10 feet from my property, but at the same time, is there any way that I can do a variance or something, because I'm not going to build a structure on my septic tank, my leaching field obviously can't do that. So am I out of luck, or what's the solution for me and thousands of other people in the community who have septic tanks and we can't get rid of them?
Actually, everyone does.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Redlaw.
Yes, Mr. Studo just said, we all have them, as we know. But you're right. There's some things you can't get around. If you have just a septic field that's just in the way of where you want to put one, it is going to be a problem. But you do have to remember too, and what I always pointed out for the last 6 years that I've been on the CPC, is we've always had the permission to have an ADU, if you will, inside those 4 walls. That's been allowed since about 1966, and when they passed the law back at that time, which allowed or actually prevented the state from restricting anything within the home. So that restricted Jerry, our building inspector. People could build an ADU inside their home, and there's not a lot he could do because it was in the law that he's not allowed to regulate that. So what we're talking about now is just making it more formal and allowing detached structures. Detached structures might present some problems if you have a septic field that is in the way, if you will, where you might place the structure. But out of the 45, close to 5,000 single-family residential structures in town, there's definitely going to be many that can't add on like they'd like to, or add a standalone if they'd like to. But there's not much we can do about it until if we got sewer that served the entire town, and so that's difficult. I appreciate what you're saying, though.
Right, but so if I vote for this, I'm out of luck. I can't ever.
Well, again, remember what we're voting for, and I want to be clear. We're voting just to add the setbacks in. We're not voting to allow, ADUs are happening. That's nothing we're going to do tonight. They're happening on February 2nd.
What if I wanted to put one 20 feet away from the line? No? Is that a hard no?
Well, it
Or
depends on your district, but if it's, RA, what's it, 3, 4, 5, you're going to be, it's 25. But yes, you can absolutely go for variance.
And then.
So you have that ability.
What's that process? Is that my neighbors get involved, the town gets involved, we come and
Perhaps,
vote on
but
it?
It's usually, a lot of the times what I see on the ZBA is people talk to their neighbors, they find out, get them to write a letter, they even have them show up at the meetings, and they say they don't have a problem with it. Happens all the time. So
It's just.
this is just remember what it is, it's by right. So that allows them to go right to the building department, all of us, to go right to the building department and file this. If it doesn't conform, that's when you have another vehicle at your disposal. You go to the ZBA.
I just want, it just seems like everyone's so against it, but no one here rents. None of you are going out and looking to rent. $50,000 to rent in North Reading for a year. Like, this is going to be a problem for the kids that are going to school right now, and they want to get out.
It's multifaceted because, again, what Mr. Massey brought up is the affordability problems in state. Well, all of the ADUs, we could build 4,000 ADUs, and we're not going to get a single credit towards an affordable home. And so a 40B can still happen, even if everyone builds an ADU. And that's an unfortunate thing. I think the state could have done is made an ADU count as an affordable unit, perhaps, or maybe meet some standard to make it affordable. That's not happening. So everyone's got their different parts they're picking off on the ADU, but the one you bring up is, if there's dimensional issues, it's just a fact. But you have a means of going around that or addressing it with the ZBA.
Okay, all right.
Steve Corielli, 49 Abbott Road. So I just want to touch on the comment that Mr. Massey brought up, which I've heard before at some of the meetings, which I've heard you say, hasn't been studied about how many, we were 4,500 houses in North Reading. So of those 4,500, there's a small percentage that would actually meet these setback requirements to do an ADU. Of that, there's a smaller percentage of people that would actually want to go forward with it. So looking at it from a perspective of, it's going to cost $20,000 to put somebody else in, in the school system, but we don't have that studied, which I think is going to be a very small impact. We have plenty of 5-bedroom houses in town. Somebody with 2 kids in that 5-bedroom house turns over, now they have 5 kids in there. We don't evaluate things that way. So I think it was a little bit misleading to throw that out here for, a vote on this, where it's really the setbacks that we're trying to set here, so.
Mr. Moderator, I just want to address Steve.
Mr. Rudloff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Steve, I was just pointing out one of the items, just like Mr. Massey did too.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, you're right.
Yep, no, I heard it, and I just wanted to
It's
comment.
just one item, so I wasn't
Correct.
using that as a reason why to oppose
I know.
a setback requirement. I was just trying to, there's a lot of people coming with different points of view on
Yep.
ADUs, and that's just one of them, that there's an imbalance there on the tax side if you do, in fact, replace that home with young children that are school-age children. It's just a reality.
Correct.
That's all.
It's a little misleading. It's such wanted
Well, I don't know
everyone
if
else
it's
to.
misleading, it's just pointing out a different way to
Fact,
look at it,
yes,
that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Studo.
Sorry. Tell me to address that comment? Hold on.
So, just a few things. And we talked about this for, hold on, let's see. We had a informal hearing, and we had a joint meeting with the CPC, so, I don't know, 5-6 hours. But during it, here's the best way to put it. The merits of this law, and then any restrictions that a community can take, already happened. It happened at the state level. It's over. So arguing here tonight about that, we can go, like I say at our meetings, when something's already been settled, we go in the spin zone. Luckily, unlike town meeting, I can cut the circle off. So what I'm saying is tonight it's more that these, also any potential restrictions, the state saw fit to allow a community to do, for whatever. And it can go yes or no tonight. But I think that the law happened, and there's arguments on both sides, but in my opinion, just for everyone, I mean, if we could sit up here for the next 4 hours and argue for or against, it happened. It's law. Now what the community is doing through the work of the CPC, and they put in a lot of hours and they got a lot of feedback, is that this is what they came up with, that for North Reading, our situation, our utility situation with septic, and all the other things that make North Reading, this was their best possible recommendations to bring to the 172 people, right, that showed up. So, again, everyone can come up and say their piece, but it's not going to change the fact that ADU by rights on February 2nd are happening, and the CPC just made recommendations to the town of what type of ADU under a forced situation could possibly work. Thank you.
Mr. Yule.
Yes, Jeff, I agree with everything that Mr. Stuto has said. We have to pass it. We need to pass it. I'm with you on that. But as I'd like to work off of what Noel Kelly did say, I'd like to hear from each elected official their opinion on the issue. That's all. Just a quick, it could be one sentence, it doesn't have to be long. But I think it's important we know where our elected officials stand. Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Challenge accepted. I don't like anything that the state shoves down our throat. I'm not a fan. Would never have voted for ADUs, but here it is. And we have to deal with it. So kudos to the CPC for putting in the hours to make some amendments to make it more palatable for our community. Don't forget, we're restricted by septic, like it was brought up. I mean, to be able to put an ADU is not going to be cheap, and you're going to have to conform. And I also just wanted to address the gentleman talking about not being able to put their child into an ADU because they're being restricted and conformed. To build something, you can still fix up your basement, you can fix up your attic, you can make a little apartment in your house. You don't have to build something separately. There's that option now. It's an ADU. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Janet Nicosia, 2 Poplar Terrace. Move the question, please.
We have moved to the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Now we'll move to the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Article 2, Mr. Rudloff.
Mr. Moderator, glasses on, that might help. Amend code zoning bylaws, short-term rental. I move to approve Article 2 as printed in the warrant.
Danielle for a short presentation.
This is brief. Article 2 is a zoning bylaw pertaining to short-term rentals. This isn't coming up now because there aren't any new state laws changing short-term rentals. It's only coming up now because this has been discussed alongside the ADU discussion as the boards have worked through the bylaw changes. Short-term rentals are not currently defined in the North Reading zoning bylaw, and to date, they have been assumed to be prohibited since they are not specifically allowed, and they have been regulated as such. The proposed bylaw tonight adopts a definition for short-term rental units, which we don't have, and it provides a timeline of 31 days or less, and that's based on the state's definition of occupancy. It codifies a prohibition on short-term rental units in all zoning districts. So essentially, this is a bylaw that would define and explain what a short-term rental is, and then prohibit it in all zoning districts.
Recommendation from the Select Board, Mr. Studo.
Select Board recommends.
Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee recommends.
CPC, Mr. Rudlow.
CPC recommends.
Discussion. Mr. Kelly.
Noel Kelly, 33 Leland Road again. So there's a 4-to-1 vote on this from the Select Board. And I think it's appropriate to hear from the one who voted against as to the rationale behind a nay vote.
Are you talking about Article 1?
The recommendation is 4-1.
Oh, up there, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have eyes back here. I'll work on that. Mr. Massey.
Mr. Moderator, I voted no. There was some discussions back and forth amongst the board about the definition of short-term rentals, extending the duration. 31 days is set by the state, so we are just abiding by the state. There was some great discussion that was held. I can't narrate it all for you here. It's off the top of my head, but I can get back to you, Mr. Kelly, that's for sure. Is that okay?
I'm sorry, can I do a follow-up? Here's my concern, okay? This is a serious issue that affects the town. Now, there was a discussion last night or the other night about one gentleman had a very strong argument about the idea that, people have been there are very few short-term rentals in North Reading, okay? And the big part of the conversation was Airbnb. Now, I think I went on Airbnb today, and I think I saw 2 listings for North Reading. Now I'm getting inundated with notifications for follow-ups, but that's different. But the point is, there are very few short-term rentals in North Reading as it exists at the moment. All right. So, to me, to that gentleman's point, if somebody has a room in their house and they want to be able to supplement their revenue stream, to be able to help pay the taxes and help pay their living expenses, for God's sake, can't we let them rent their room for a week? How many partiers do we get into North Reading in May for spring break? I mean, seriously. I mean, this is not a huge issue. But I understand, Mr. Studo was going on about his father down in Malden looking across the street. Folks, North Reading and Malden are miles apart, as we know. So, again, this is a big deal because it's removing an opportunity for people to be able to utilize their own homes how they would wish to do it. And Mr. Massey cannot provide me with a strong, substantive reason as to why he would oppose this.
Mr. Moderator, if anything, Mr. Kelly, I'm actually in your favor by voting no, but I will go outside that. To answer your question, if short-term rentals are taking place in North Reading, we don't have a definition, Mr. Kelly, for short-term rentals. So what this is doing, and Mr. Studo says it so eloquently, is We are creating the definition of short-term in North Reading and then banning it.
And what?
And then banning it.
And then
And
banning?
then banning short-term rentals of 31 days or less.
Right, and so that's my point.
So what you wanted, Mr.
No, but what I'm
Kelly,
asking
actually
for you, because I heard the conversation, was you were talking about other term limits. That's all I'm asking for, is a substantive reason as to why you would vote no against this.
Mr. Studo.
So, again, on this one as well, with input, just the opinion we gave, the select board gave the Community Planning Commission, you took the law, which went into effect, you get the list of what you can make it to try to make it more palatable for your community, and once again, I'm not gonna rehash a sewer discussion, but it's all septic. That's one big thing with utilities, okay? We don't have the infrastructure to be Malden, even if we chose to. We don't. But outside of that, again, it's to give the community a decision that I, for one, moved to North Reading so it does not look like Malden. Sorry. So if it starts becoming Malden, might as well move back. Send my kid to Malden Catholic, call it a day. My property taxes will go down. I'm just being really honest with you. So that's what I hear from the community. So here, though, it can become a nuisance to the community. And people don't have to agree with me tonight. You don't have to vote for this. And we can allow, and I agree with you, I don't think we're gonna have a free-for-all, everyone coming to North Reading. I'm with you on that. But at the same time, that we took what we could, and, well, let me rephrase. The Community Planning Commission did all this. And then we came and had some discussion with the select board, and they proposed doing this based on their body of work, which was much fuller, and not just here. I mean, it wasn't just now. I mean, they've been working on this for 3-4 years, correct? So this has been going on a while. They have this research. So again, I think that, and the gentleman who brought up the examples, the amounts were negligible, as you said, but I highly doubt, like everything in life, if somebody wants to rent their room, they're gonna do it whether or not we pass this tonight. Just like if somebody, you can't run a poker game out of your basement, I'm sure there's one somewhere that's happening. And that's what I'm trying to say. So here, it's not like this, but we will have something in the books where, God forbid, from a liability standpoint, this is to protect residents too. Because I will mention one thing. Again, the example keeps being brought up about how can seniors create more revenue. I call it, how can seniors create another headache? In this state, as soon as you rent something, you have less rights than the tenant. Fact. Fact. And then, God forbid, there is a child, thank you for playing. You're dead before you're evicting them. And that's fact. So to me, again, and I'm a super capitalist, people can do whatever they want, but they should know, and this is a way of us being able to portray that to the community, that, it's not just easy money, and these are some of the risks. And I'm happy that during this discussion, that's come out previous. I've been saying that for a while. So again, I am in favor of doing this just because I think that short-term rentals, unfortunately, can bring more bad than good. The good pretty much ends at making extra money, and then it's just all downhill from there. So that's where we came with this. It's not, again, to make it harder for someone to raise extra revenue. It's more of, we bring it here, it's town meeting. If town meeting says yes, they say yes. If they say no, I'll help you sign up for Airbnb tomorrow. Just come by my office for a coffee. Thank you.
Parker Moffett, 55 Central Street. Mr. Kelly, I appreciate your comments. If you don't want to get the ads from Airbnb, I think you can delete your cookies, and that'll help clear that up. I'm a CPA here in Massachusetts. I have lived in North Reading now for about 4 years. I've been a practicing CPA for over a decade. And this idea of having a business that you own, whether it's on your Schedule E property that you rent out or otherwise, is something that is just personally very interesting and directly relevant to me as a professional. I appreciate Mr. Sudo's comments about wanting to protect us from ourselves. I'm not sure that's really the role of the town here. I think that we have a responsibility to take care of our own selves and each other, but not necessarily by means of the heavy hand, friendly as it may be, of our local select board and other government officers here. There is an issue at play that I don't know if many people are aware of. This is not tax advice, just for the record, although I am a CPA. Since 1976, there has been a rule in the tax code that is colloquially known as the Augusta Rule. Under that rule, and this is due to people renting their homes down in Augusta, Georgia for the Masters, if you rent your home out for 14 days or less, that income is not taxable on your federal income taxes. Once you exceed that amount, it becomes taxable. There are plenty of people in this town who have no interest in running an Airbnb full-time out of their home. I don't want to do that to my home. But I think there are a lot of people who may go on vacation for a week or two over the summer or over the winter or around graduation, around leaf peeping, and want to provide an opportunity for people who want to come visit our wonderful town to have a place to stay in a wonderful community that we all love. And if they do it under the guidelines of the tax law that the federal government has passed, they can do so without having to pay taxes on that. And so I just wanted to put that out there that there are headaches, of course. I think we'd all agree with that. But there are a lot more benefits here than I think people realize. And while we would all appreciate a definition of what a short-term rental is, I can't support this motion when it is paired with moving against permitting that in our town. Thank you very much.
Steve Corielli, 49 Abbott Road. Mr. Rudloff, we had some good conversation at the last CPC meeting surrounding short-term rentals. You voiced that, your concerns were it could be, a hit to the character of the neighborhood, which I can understand. One of the things I forgot to ask you during that meeting was, why is it zoned out completely and not met in the middle with can be allowed by special permit? Because there are applications where this it could be approved. Then the neighbors are aware that there's a short-term rental going on. To the gentleman that just spoke's point, if somebody wants to do it, a couple times a year, it still allows them to do it versus banning what they can do within their own home. And then one more thing to Mr. Studo's point. An Airbnb guest can, if they're in violation of the terms of Airbnb, can be removed from the premises immediately with police intervention, as far as I know. They have different rights than a renter does.
Mr. Studo?
They can be asked. Good luck getting a judge to enforce it for a while. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's not just one other thing. It's not, I don't believe in saving people from themselves. That's not how I affiliate politically. So it's more, though, that people should know the risks. And that's what this is. People should know, because a lot of people don't. Because, again, we don't live in a rental community. So unless somebody has rental property somewhere, a lot of people aren't aware that, again, Airbnb can say go home, and I can just ignore the email. That's the thing. I know which one you're talking about. And then I can even say go home, and you can ignore me. So that's what I was just trying to say about the concern, that it's going to be a while before the sheriff shows up. That's all I'm trying to say.
Mr. Rudloff, I'd like to hear your comments on why this couldn't have been met with the special permit.
Mr. Rudloff.
Thanks, Ms. Marder. To be honest, Steve, we didn't even look into it.
Okay.
It wasn't a consideration to make it something that the ZBA could consider. It's an honest answer.
Okay, thank you.
Robert Atkinson Jr., 82 Elm Street. I was acting as a property manager for my mother, who owned rental property in Saugus, and she doesn't own that building anymore for a reason, because we had to evict, and that was like a 6-month process. So I can hear Mr. Scudo. I lived that particular brand of hell. And it was a 4-unit building my parents purchased in 1965, and my mom sold it in 2012, which is one of the reasons I live here now, because I was living in the building at the time. But anyway, what scares me about not having definition is the statement was made that because we don't specifically permit short-term rentals, that they're effectively banned. I'm not so sure a smart lawyer would agree with that statement. And if he finds a client that wants to challenge that issue, he might be very successful, particularly given the bent of the courts and the legislature in this state. So with that being said, we may not like the definition being as proposed. That's fine. But I'd like to see some sort of definition. Whether it's 30 days, 31 days, 14 days, something, at least we put a stake in the ground and we say, okay, this is where we stand. We may have to change it. The courts may tell us week after that we're, our argument is a load of fetid dingoes' kidneys, but at some point we have to define something. So I applaud the Planning Commission, I applaud the Select Board for the work they're doing to try to put some kind of a definition on paper that even if we don't all agree with it, we can at least understand what the rules actually are. Because right now there's really no rules in place. It's the Wild Wild West. So I appreciate it. I thank the folks for doing the work. And, you got to vote your conscience. Where you stand depends on where you sit. So if you're for it or against it, that's okay. It's just as long as there's something out there that we can hang our hat on. Thank you.
Mr. Atkinson, just to clear up, sorry. Mr. Moderator.
Don't do that. And I'm calling on him.
Hi, Matthew Page, 1 Peabody Street. I call the question.
Move to the question. All those in favor of moving to the question, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So the motion on Article 2 is to approve as printed in the warrant. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. I'm clear. Are you clear? No, it's a yes, right? It's a yes. I heard that it carried. Oh, it's 2/3? Sorry. We'll do a count. It's 2/3, sorry. 2/3, we'll do a count. This line, Amy? I'm gonna go split them. Yes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. I'm sorry. Well, maybe that was louder. Opposed? No. All right. All in favor, please raise your hands to be counted. I did. I stole it. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Mr. Moderator.
62? Amy, sorry. 62? 6. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hands.
Nine, Mr. Moderator, 29.
The vote was 106 yes, and 49 no. It's a total vote of 100 and there's a total vote of 155. You need 2/3 is 103. The motion carries. There were 106 in favor. Right? Double check again. I don't want to get caught. Yep.
Think the FEMA
Mr.
will get them going or what?
So the motion carried.
Think the FEMA one will get
Mr.
them going?
Rudloff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 3, amend code zoning bylaws, floodplain district. I move to amend section 244 floodplain district of the zoning bylaw and the overlay district map established therein as printed in the warrant with the insertion date of July 8th, 2025, where indicated by the 2 spaces left for such insertion in subsection B1 of the proposed bylaw.
Danielle for a presentation.
FEMA periodically updates their flood rate insurance maps and regulations for communities to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And the town has been notified that this is to take place effective July 8th, 2025. This bylaw adopts the current requirements of FEMA in order to allow the town and residents to remain participants in the National Flood Insurance Program and to be able to access flood insurance. It makes federally required amendments to the permitting process, including the following new changes, which are required of all communities. It designates a position in town as a floodplain manager, and in our case, it would be the conservation agent. It requires an administrative permit for any activity in the floodplain, including earth removal and storage of temporary vehicles. And it retains the current requirements that for special permits for construction within the 100-year floodplain, and the CPC would continue to be the special permit granting authority as they are now. It adopts the new flood insurance rate maps. Those final maps will be dated July 8th, 2025. This date would be incorporated into the bylaw through the motion, which you heard a moment ago. The maps are created by FEMA, but can be accessed via the town website. As FEMA continues to release more detailed geographic data, the town will use this information to identify property owners who may be impacted by map changes and notify them. The letters of map change will continue to be an available appeal avenue for owners who feel their properties have been misclassified, and the town can assist with that. The final text of the proposed bylaw has been approved by the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation as of January 3rd this year, as it's been printed in the warrant. Those dates were inserted with the motion only because we did not have the final release dates at the time of the printing of the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board. Mr. O'Leary.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
For the Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
For the Community Planning Commission, Mr. Rudolph.
CPC recommends.
Discussion. Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Murphy, back in August of 2023, by the way, a big shout out to our town planner, because without her, every article tonight would not exist as it stands. This is the lady behind the talk. Hours and hours of air has been exhausted in back and forth with yays and nays and whys and all kinds of reasons why you should and shouldn't. But behind it all is the reason that this gets done. And I just can't stress enough the amount of work this lady has put into it and how accessible she is when it comes to answering questions that pertain to any of the items that we've seen here tonight. So, not to make your job any harder than it already is, Danielle, I would suggest anybody got any questions, that's the lady to talk to, because she's the only one who knows the facts, okay? That said, in 2023, I went before the Select Board. A notice had been published in the transcript announcing that FEMA had come out with their preliminary plans for the next iteration. Nobody in the room was aware of this. And this had been published in the transcript that week. And it was total oblivion. And so I had the opportunity to be able to explain to them what the ramifications were of the FEMA floodplain maps. And my own personal experience, where I had an opportunity in the last go-around to actually opt out of it, it costs money. So at that meeting, there was one representative of the CPC there, Mr. Griffin, and I explained in detail to Mr. Griffin what the circumstances were pertaining to the floodplain map. I didn't hear a discussion about the floodplain map up until a couple of months ago when Ms. McKnight put forward that it had come to the point where a date had been set to put this forward. And there was a joint meeting there a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple of weeks ago. Mr. O'Leary made a suggestion that perhaps, thank you, Steve, you're echoing my suggestion from 23, that the town take a more proactive role in informing the citizens as to what this will affect them. There are people who come into town who are not aware of the floodplain. They're not aware until the bank hits them with a premium surcharge. There are elderly people who don't have mortgages. Not elderly, it could be anybody in the town who might not have a mortgage. They don't know they're in the floodplain because nobody is telling them. You don't know it until there's a flood, and then if you don't have the insurance, good luck. You're on your own. My point is, the town has taken a very much of a backseat role in informing the citizenry of what the impact of the floodplain is. The floodplain impacts us not just in insurance, that's all anybody talks about, is floodplain insurance. It affects us on community planning. When we were talking about running the sewer down Main Street, nobody was talking about the upcoming changes to the floodplain map, which would have had a profound impact potentially on any plans. So I would suggest going forward that the CPC, because Ms. McKnight might not be with us next year or the year after, but it's up to the group, the committees, to oversee that these initiatives are properly maintained and that the citizenry is kept informed. So this is a no-brainer. If you don't vote on this, any of us in the floodplain, we don't get insurance. Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. O'Leary.
To Mr. Kelly's credit, again, he was very vocal about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago before the board. And about, I think, 11 years ago, when we went through this map changing in the community, there were a number of citizens who were impacted and found out through the grapevine and through a happenstance or an occurrence where they were denied some insurance. To the motion before us, to Mr. Kelly's point, this is a no-brainer. If we want our residents who are in a floodplain to have the ability to get insurance and coverage, we need to pass this. We should just pass this. But to the other point, and the greater point, and the administration is undertaking efforts now so that residents will be notified and can be notified of any changes in the maps and changes in the locations of the floodplain and how it impacts their property. And so that's being undertaken right now by the administration, and the maps are going to be available. There will be letters sent out to residents who have been impacted, and both favorably and unfavorably. In other words, as these things move, some properties go into the floodplain and some come out. So we're going to be monitoring it much more closely to your suggestion from a couple of 3 years ago, and it's something that we should be doing on a proactive basis. We are listening. It was brought to our attention again, and it's finally coming to the forefront. So we appreciate your interest and your stepping forward and keeping us aware and on our toes, and we are moving forward with it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 4. Mrs. Gonzalez.
Moderator, you have a motion for a bid?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. You want, just do it, just say it, yeah.
Mr. Moderator, I move to admit State Senator Bruce Tarr.
Any discussion on the motion to admit? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Correct. Aye, Bruce? Ms. Gonzalez.
Article 4, payment in lieu of taxes, pilot agreements for renewable energy generation/storage facilities. I move to approve Article 4 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Gilberto.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, just very briefly, this article would authorize the Select Board to enter into a payment in lieu of tax agreement with private entities that install renewable energy generation or storage facilities. In the particular case that's brought this to light, Kearsarge River Park LLC has obtained permits to construct a battery storage facility at 500 River Park Drive, and they have proposed a payment in lieu of tax agreement with the town. Entering into this agreement allows the property owner and the town to extend the depreciation period for taxable value for the equipment to be installed, creating a more stable tax revenue stream over a longer period of time for the town. Those of you who may remember, we had a similar agreement come up over at the property behind the DPW yard with Reading Municipal Light. So we do have a similar structure already in place that has been successful for providing a stable tax revenue stream. In the absence of agreement, the depreciation of the equipment happens pretty quickly, and so we end up receiving a much smaller amount over the period of time, particularly as we get to the 10th, 15th, and 20th year. So the terms of the agreement are not yet finalized. That's something that the Select Board would negotiate after town meeting, assuming approval. Thank you.
Can I have a recommendation from the Select Board?
Select Board recommends unanimous.
Finance Committee?
Finance Committee recommends.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Article 5, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Moderator, Article 5. Prior year bills. I move to authorize payments of bills of a prior fiscal year from the fiscal year 2025 operating budget voted under Article 16 of the June 10th, 2024 annual town meeting in the following amount: $89.60 for waste disposal to be paid from line 55, solid waste expenses, as specified in Article 5 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
Further discussion? This does require a 9/10 vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Article 6.
Good evening. I move to pass over Article 6 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation from the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 7. Mr. Wallner.
I move to pass over Article 7 as printed in the warrant.
Recommendation for the Select Board.
Select Board unanimously recommends.
For the Finance Committee.
Finance Committee recommends.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. One more motion.
I move to adjourn this meeting. It's United D8.
On the motion to adjourn, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much for attending.